Welcome to this week's perspective on the Sabbath. The portion of the week is Miketz, the story of Joseph's rise to power in Egypt, rags to riches, you could say. And I want to concentrate on one aspect of this. And that is when Joseph meets Pharaoh, the Pharaoh of Egypt, and is successful in explaining the dreams that had bothered Pharaoh so much. By the way, for a period of 2 years, when it was at the end of 2 years, Pharaoh was dreaming is not exactly a correct translation of the Hebrew. The correct translation would be after Pharaoh was continuously dreaming for 2 years. He had the same dream. It's brought in the Farsi. He had the same dream repeatedly over these 2 years. There's also internal evidence that this must be the case, because he called all the Khartoumim, all the sorcerers and necromancers of Egypt. Well, Egypt is a big country. He couldn't call them on one day. It must be that he had assembled them around him over a longer period of time. And this was, of course, what worried Pharaoh in these dreams, that they were recurrent, that he couldn't get rid of them. Okay. But that's not what we want to talk about. We want to talk about what happened to Joseph once Pharaoh elevated him to this new position of prime minister or minister of supplies or whatever the position may have been. In any case, a Mishneh Lemelech, a viceroy, a second in command of the whole of Egypt. An extremely powerful position for a Jewish boy who just came out of jail. But Pharaoh does something very specific. It says in the Pasuk, it says in the verse, I'm talking about Mem Aleph, Pasuk Mem Beis, chapter 41, verse 42. I'll read it to you and then translate. Vayosef Pharaoh estabato me al yodao, vayitin osor al yad Yosef. Vayalbesh also bigdei sheish, vayosem revit hazohov al tzaboau. Pharaoh removed his tabatal, his tabaat. Tabaat means a ring that makes a seal. It is not just a ring, it is actually the grand seal of Egypt. And he removed it from his hand, and he put it on Joseph's hand. We actually found the depictions of this initiation or installation ceremony on Egyptian frescoes or inscriptions on Egyptian monuments. You see there a dignitary, and you see the pharaoh, and he has this ring. It's not really a ring, it's a seal. It's like a shape, a big thing. And he has it on his hand, and he takes it off his hand and he puts it on the hand of the functionary. So it's not he took his ring off and put it on the hand of Joseph. No.
Otherwise, it would have said finger.
Right. It could have been Etzba'al, his finger, but it says Al Yodah on his hand. So that's one thing that he does. And then he dresses him in bigdei sheish, in ceremonial robes. And he puts some kind of insignia on his shoulders, some kind of what you have in the army, epaulets, whatever they're called. I want to concentrate on this one thing, that he dressed him in bigdei sheish, in these ceremonial, very expensive garments, vestments. We spoke last week about the bigdei kahuna, another occurrence of this word beget. And I want to concentrate on the word beget. Beget, Beit Gimel Dalet, is written with 3 letters that are consecutive in the Hebrew alphabet. Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet. The Aleph is left out, but the Beit, Gimel, Dalet are there. The Hebrew language gives us very often hints on how a word is to be understood by the simple mechanism of the letters by which the word is written. That these letters are consecutive in the Hebrew alphabet is no coincidence. If we look at the root, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, we see that it has two different meanings. It means both clothing, garbs, vestment. It also means betrayal. Livgaud means to betray. And you can understand a little bit. When we, in English, say he does something under the cloak of darkness, it means he hides what his real intentions are. And in a sense, clothes that we wear also hide something. The very word hide in English is your skin, right? The thing by which your body, your inner life is clothed. You find exactly the same thing in Hebrew. You have, right in the beginning of Bereshis, in the beginning of Genesis, in the second and third chapter, you find that man and his wife were naked. They didn't have clothes. And in the subsequent story, we won't go into the detail of obviously the conversation with the serpent, with Nachash, etc., who was, by the way, also naked. The word there is translated, of course, he was crafty, but it's exactly the same word. Orum, ayin, reish, mem. Then man and his wife discovered that they are naked, right? After they've eaten from this fruit. And in the end, God makes for them kesonos al, a tunic. Kesonos means like, it's even the same word in Latin. Latin has it from Hebrew. Tunic and kesonos has exactly the same consonants. He makes for them these garments of skin. He clothes them in skin. Now, skin in Hebrew is ayin, vav, resh. Light, on the other hand, is aleph, vav, resh. The two words are clearly related to each other. And in Jewish mysticism, we speak about the kosnos al with an aleph, the garments of light with which Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, man and his wife, were dressed before their fall, so to say, before they sinned. And our skin or hide is ayin vav resh. We have another word that's written ayin vav resh, and that is iver, blindness. Blindness is when you cannot see something. Hide or or is also related to not being able to see, because a garment it covers up what is underneath it. So this is a dual function of Beged. Beged, on the one hand, as Paro dressed Yosef in these ceremonial robes, or as the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, is dressed in the big day Kohuno, in the priestly garments or vestments. In that sense, it is expressing what your position is. It proclaims to the world, I am the viceroy of Egypt, or I am the Kohen Gadol, the high priest. But at the same time, it hides who you really are. And this is something that needs to be understood. We need to grasp what the function of clothing is in the light of the story that we find in Bereshis. In Bereshis, it says, "Vayiyu shnehem arumim," both of them were naked. Ha'adam v'ishto, man and his wife, v'lo yisbau shoshu, and they were, usually it's translated, they were not ashamed. But that, I think, is slightly misleading translation, because we find very often, for example, in Tehillim, in the Psalms, we find the plea to God, let me not be ashamed. Velau evos, and I will not be ashamed. What do you mean ashamed? Very often it is, I have a conflict with the people around me and I ask for your assistance and let me not be ashamed. What do you mean ashamed? Because you have a conflict with people around you, people are persecuting you or you're in trouble and you ask not to be ashamed. What is it to be ashamed of? Elamai, what is the real meaning of this word bosh? This word which usually is translated as shame, it means frustrated, not being able to reach your purpose. That is the real meaning, or to give up on something and not to expect any fulfillment of what you're waiting for anymore. For example, when Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher Moses, went up to the mountain on Har Sinai, on the Mount Sinai, to be close to God and to receive all the details of the Torah, of the Holy Torah, he stayed away for 40 days and 40 nights. When that time was over, the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, wondered what happened to this man, Moshe. And it says that he was boshesh. He was shaming. but there in context, it means he is not keeping his word. He's not keeping his promise. He frustrates our expectation of him. And therefore, we're giving up on him. And therefore, we now demand that we should have replacement for him in the form of the golden calf, of the Egel Hazal. There's no shame involved here, but a lot of frustration. Now, if we translate this to what is said about Adam and Chava, about Adam and Eve, that they were not ashamed, they were naked and not ashamed, I think a better understanding is they were completely fulfilled. They didn't need any clothing because what you saw was what you got. There was no deception involved here. They lived a perfect life. And it is in that sense that they were naked. Interestingly enough, the word orum, naked, of course, when applied to the serpent, it's then translated crafty, but it's exactly the same word. It really means what you see is what you get. And it is sort of inversely related to this word ol, hide with an ayin. Ayin vav resh is hide. Ayin resh vav mem is naked. So even in the letters that it uses, it is related. By the way, you find exactly those letters, Ayin Resh, you find them also back in the name of the Egyptian king. He is called Paro, right? So he is also has some aspect of this phenomenon of hiding and proclaiming at the same time. You hide who you are, but you proclaim what you aspire to be. Any functionary who has a distinctive dress is, by wearing that dress, he's projecting, this is what I claim to be. Whether he is or whether he isn't is a second thing. But at least he claims to be that man. That's why dictators dress themselves in very impressive clothes, because they project, this is who I am. I am the powerful man. I'm the man that I show myself to be. But at the same time, if your clothes are not corresponding to your inner self, it is not telchel kebaral, the outside is like the inside, then you are deceiving the world with your clothes. And of course, in the Yosef story, the function of clothing as a means of deception is abundantly present. In last week's episode, when Joseph is in the house of Potiphar, his Egyptian master, and Mrs. Potiphar tries to seduce him, he leaves his baguette in her hands. And this baguette is being shown by her as a proof that he tried to rape her, that he tried to assault her. So here, Joseph's beged is being used as a proof against him, as an accusation against him. This, for Joseph, must have been a throwback to an earlier episode in his own life, namely when he was sold into slavery. His brothers, when they, overcome by their jealousy of Joseph, decided to get rid of him, they stripped him of his cloak, his Kesonus Passim, his splendid his robe of splendor, and they used that very beged by dipping it in the blood of a goat. They brought it to their father and said, Hakerno, can you recognize this? Isn't this the coat of your son? So they used the coat as a deception. We have an earlier episode where a beged was used as a means of deception, namely when Yaakov stole the brachot, the blessings, from his brother Esau by misleading his father by wearing, at least according to the service meaning of the service meaning of the episode, of the narrative, it must have been a deception. And again, clothes were used as a deception. Now, how are we to interpret this? When we look at what Yaakov prayed to God when he left his father's house and he was going to go into exile, he asked God for specific things. He says, it says that Yaakov made a vow. He made a deal with God. If you do this for me, then I do that for you. If you assist me on the way that I'm going and you look after me and you guarantee my safety, and then I will give tithes, I will give 1/10 of all I have to you. And specifically, he's asking, V'nosan li lechem le'echal, let him give me bread to eat, ubeget lubos, and a garment to wear. Now we're going to take a deep dive to put this into context. We have in Jewish mysticism, in Torah's Hanistar, the study of the hidden things, we have a concept called islabshus, cloaking or being surrounded by clothing. Islabshus. It's a little bit something like a disguise. God himself, Hashem, the Bara Olam, the creator of the world, uses his creation as a beged. He uses his creation as a way of cloaking himself. We say it in Bochi Nafshi, one of the Psalms. I don't know the number by heart. I should put it in the subtitles later on for this video. But it says that Salmo, he spreads out light as Salmo, as a cloak. Meaning that the material world as it appears to us does two things. It hides the creator, because all we see is the physical world. And at the same time, it proclaims the creator. It has this dual function that every beged always has. It both hides and reveals. It reveals the potential, what this world can be, and it hides the creator who created this world. When Yaakov leaves Beersheba in the beginning of Parshas Vayelach, it says there that Yaakov left Beersheba, and the footnote that our sages place is Yetzias HaTzadik min hamokam oseroshem. When a tzaddik, a righteous man, leaves a place, it leaves behind an impression. When do you see an impression? After he has left. And this is also the tabat of Paro is the grand seal of Paro. How can you see what imprint that seal makes? You can only see it after the seal has been removed from the wax. That's the nature of imprint. Now, the word tabas is from the root tet beit ayin, which is exactly the same word as teva, nature. The material world is called teva. It is an imprint of the creator on his world, which can only be visible when the one who makes the imprint has withdrawn himself from the imprint. Just like a seal has to be lifted out of the wax, and then you can see the imprint. This is the only way in which we can relate to the infinite creator. We are not infinite beings. We are finite beings. We live within nature. So we need to relate to him in a way that speaks on our level, so that we are not ashamed, so that we're not here without a purpose. So when we recognize the world around us as a baguette, as a cloak, in which the Aleph is not visible, the Aleph base starts with Aleph beit gimel dalet, but the Aleph is not there anymore. All we have left is the beit, the gimel, and the dalet. This is, by the way, also one of the reasons why the Torah itself starts with the letter beit and not with the letter Aleph. The letter Aleph has to wait until Sinai, when Hashem shows himself and says, Onochi Hashem Elokech. So the Ten Commandments starts with the letter Aleph, but the Torah starts with the letter beit. You have to go all the way from the beit back to the Aleph, through this world, through your growing in this world, and then